Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic creator and writer Rob Multari. Hopefully, I got it right. Hopefully, if I didn't, I'm sure I will be corrected. But
Yeah, you're
welcome
all
to the
good.
show.
All good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited because obviously, I don't know if you reached out to me or I reached out to you, but we put it off for a reason so that it would come out and we would be doing this interview when the Kickstarter was going live.
Yep.
And so I do want to talk about Nightwolf and everything with the Kickstarter. We're doing issues 1 through 5 here. We're going to be talking about that in a second. But before we get into that, I am curious how you got into comics because you have a very unique perspective in.
Yeah. So when I first got into comics, I was real young, like first grade ish. I have ADHD and dyslexia, and so it was kind of like a way that my mom helped me to learn how to read and get past my disability. And so she bought me these Batman Untold Tales. There was a trilogy of them that came together with cassette tapes. So I would listen to the cassette tapes and follow along with the word bubbles. And it kind of helped me to kind of recognize words, and from there it just was like, since comics are very broken up into smaller chunks, instead of blocks of text, it also helped me to develop my reading and figure things out. And so from there it just kind of I've been collecting since then. And I got to a point where like in junior high, I decided that I wanted to get into comics and write comics, and I was drawing things on my own. I'm not the greatest artist, so I decided to focus on what I was better at. So I had my character designs, and then I handed them off to my artist once I finally found my artist. And
Because one of the things about you, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, is that you did graduate
mhm,
from an art school and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Applied Media.
mhm.
And so obviously that is something that I don't think most writers have per se. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. So I still have that art background. I'm a graphic and web designer by trade. So I do have a little bit of artistic talent as far as illustration. But for me, it's like it takes a long time to get something like the quality like that you'd be seeing in a comic book, or like to get to that. I can do it, but it's just to me, it's like it's not where my best time is being spent. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, I completely understand that. I can draw very, very poorly. I am masterful at stick figures. You give me a stick figure and I will put everybody to shame. I'm just saying. Because that's what I'm good at. I understand how to draw stick figures. I also know how to draw outside the lines. And that could be interpreted in many ways, however you want to go that, and my tongue knows how to take long licks. But anyhow, that's not the point here. So let's get into Nightwolf, and I promise we're going to circle back to this art degree that you have. So Nightfall obviously has 4 issues that are currently out there.
Yes. Mhm.
And then issue 5 is being kickstarted with the rest of it also being available.
Mhm.
And so, what is the basic premise of Nightwolf, and where did it come from? Because some people might be hearing about it for the first time, others know what it's about, and people are coming onto my podcast saying, "What are you guys talking about?" So,
Right, right.
obviously, I want to catch everybody at a basic block before we start diving into it.
Yeah, yeah. So, so issues 1 through 4 is available at this for this campaign as well. So it's issue 5 is for the people who've already been around, and for those who haven't. And so that's why we have issues 1 through 4 available as well. But Nightwolf is a story about a young man who finds out that he's born a werewolf and gets thrown into a supernatural war.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to dive into that. So I think it's Rodney Marcelli, and what winds up happening is that Rodney is your typical privileged high school kid. He's got the car, he's got a scholarship to a college, he's a great quarterback, he's got the hot girlfriend,
Right.
and then stuff starts happening in his life that are supernatural oriented. I guess some vampires, werewolves, any creature that I guess is from that realm. And he envisions some of it, and then it hits his small town, and that's kind of where we go. So, what was it like creating Rodney as a character? Because we have a perfect teenager's life that is slowly getting messed up, and then he's thrown into a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
But it's a nice foil to generate.
Yeah, so for me, like I wrote Rodney as like the way I wanted to have my high school experience that I didn't
Yeah.
have.
Oh, so you didn't have a car, you didn't have the hot girlfriend, you didn't play football,
I mean,
shocking.
I did play football, but I was not a football star. I mean, I was a lineman, and I didn't get any glory or anything. My name wasn't in the paper. So I basically, I did all the grunt work. I didn't have a scholarship. I did, I had girlfriends, but she wasn't like the homecoming queen or anything. um, but like, and for me, like I grew up like with that like ugly duckling thing going on. Like I was really in elementary school I was the chunky kid that everybody made fun of for reading comics. you know um Plus the fact that I was dyslexic, so everybody and ADD, everybody made fun of me for just whatever. So I had my group of misfit friends that I hung out with, which I wouldn't trade for the world. But it's one of those things where it's like, it was like, I wish I was one of those popular kids at the time. Now I'm not, whatever. I don't care so much.
Nobody's
I'm better for
laughing
it.
now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm better for it now. Um, you know, uh, but I did get to experience that kind of stuff like in college. It was totally different. There was nobody there who knew my past. So it was like just, a lot more fun. um, but like with for him, so I put him on this pedestal because I wanted to show like from the beginning that like he had everything, and then everything gets taken away from him. He gets knocked down. Like he has to deal with figuring out how to like everything was basically like I wouldn't say it was handed to him, but like he had this cushiony teenage life. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
then
yeah. So the way I describe it, because obviously I read the first four issues, I skimmed it, so I probably missed some details, and I'm the first person to admit it. But I read it actually, so I know I do my homework. Everybody, if you speak to Chuck Pino or Travis Gibb, they say Andrew has a unique skill here, and he has a unique approach. He actually reads the comic.
which is
Um, it's a secret technique. So
I know, right?
because the way I describe it is that he doesn't have necessarily a privileged life, but his life is good, and he doesn't have problems the same way that my high school career was and yours was.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying we were getting killed in high school or it was a war zone, but obviously my path into high school and getting out of it was very different than the star quarterback in my
Yeah,
grade.
exactly.
And
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting into fights, in high school because like people, like whenever they like ragged on me was one thing, but when you don't talk about my mom, you know, like once they started getting, like saying stuff about my mom, it was like, the gloves are off, let's go. So yeah,
and what I like about what happens to him is that he starts discovering that he has powers, and he starts figuring out, okay, there's something different about me. He sort of gets a mentor to some degree, and then he has to learn what his powers are.
hmm
He has to learn why people are after him. He has to learn, okay, this is what it all means. And then he has a whole nother power that nobody in his group of people who have powers have. And he doesn't necessarily know how to utilize any of these skill sets.
exactly.
And he's sort of figuring out, and it's kind of nice to have that easy, great life in this world, and now you're back at square one,
hmm
and you have to figure out what's going on.
It's like learning to walk again.
And he's sort of getting his ass kicked a little bit, and it's a very interesting thing. And I know the trope's been done before, but it's also nice to see it really spelled out cleanly. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like about Rodney as a character, is that that's what's going on, and then but he still has his motivation. And that's the thing, is that he's not a not hard worker or lazy, and so he's dealing with all that. So what was that like, sort of rebuilding him, but keeping his motivation to give that rise mentality
Yeah.
out?
So I wanted it. I didn't want it to be just like the straight up hero mentality, because like the way his character is he's kind of like that modern age gray line, like good's not so good and bad's not so bad kind of a situation. Whereas like back in the day, like you're either really good or really bad, and there was no gray line. Where like modern day, there's a lot of that blurred, uh, because it's just the kind of way it is now. And so I kind of wanted it to be like that's kind of like where he is more like he's kind of like a little bit of an anti-hero, if you will. His motivations are good, but for selfish reasons in a way. Like he's, a lot of
Yeah,
it's
we're gonna ruin some of that. So he gets thrown into a war, and so we're gonna back out of Rodney for a second. But obviously, the Dark Covenant and the, I guess, Minoke or
Monakai.
Monakai. I don't know how it's supposed to be said here.
Yeah,
But
it's a made up word that that I made, and it's kind of like the combination of two different words. Mono meaning one, and kai is I forget which language I took that from, but it's supposed to mean God. So it's like one God. It's Monokai is one God because they believe in, so like the purebreds believe in like the seraphim and the the good angels and stuff, whereas like the mongrels believe they follow the Dark Lord, and so they, rather than their pagan gods where they have multiple gods, the original werewolf tribes worship, so that they kind of became outcast, and that was their that word was their branding, if you will, from the original werewolf tribes.
And so basically, what winds up happening is Rodney is a Monokai, and he gets thrown into a massive war between these two sides. And he doesn't know why that war is happening. And even setting that up, and obviously, what I like even going further, and it's why Rodney sort of gets his ass kicked in the first 4 issues in many ways. And obviously, in issue 5, things sort of to start to gear up for, I guess, the comeback tour, if you will. And I don't think I'm ruining anything.
You got your training montage, and
And so what prompted this? Because the Dark Covenant winds up kidnapping Rodney's girlfriend, and so he's self-interested to that degree of getting his girl back. And he doesn't want anything to happen to his girl because he probably can't do much better, but that's a different discussion completely. So what is that entire thing like, where now they obviously kidnapped, he has a selfish reason, but now he's forced / actively participating in this war that's about to go down? Because it is complicated when you are both forced and you're an active participant. Because
right.
technically, he could leave, technically speaking. He does not have to prescribe.
Yeah.
But it's one of those circumstances that's super interesting.
Yeah, he so really, because his life hasn't, like, he's not directly involved in any of this. It's in for, like, especially for a modern mind who's never seen this kind of, humans in my universe, they don't notice these underworld creatures, or or even like
It's like, have you read Fables? I'm a Fables, the classic Vertigo book that made Vertigo and DC actually relevant. Nobody notices Fabletown in Fables, and that's what it reminds me of, where this war is not really noticed in humanity.
Right. Whereas it's actually around them without them knowing. Like, so it's not just like one place that's hidden. It's like they just have these things are around that they're oblivious to. And I kind of opened that up a little bit more in my spin-off series, Snowpaw, that's coming out this summer, where I actually will put like little like creatures like in the background, like that we see, but like in the characters in the scene don't notice. Just to kind of reiterate that that's a thing. But once your eyes are open, it's it becomes like, oh, well, now you notice that you're like, whoa, where did that come from? What is that? You know, what's happening here? you
And,
know,
and to even go further, because obviously the Dark Covenant has a lot of resources, and I don't know what the Monokai have as far as resources per se. And we're going to get into Snowfall in 1 second here, but obviously the Dark Covenant sends out massive amounts
yeah,
of vampires and witches and
demons,
you know,
yeah.
I don't know if they have goblins. I don't know if they have goblins, because I'm a goblin freak. I love goblins. I think the goblins are the greatest mythical creature ever.
Oh,
I
I
love
mean, there's not any in this story, but Snowpaw opens up more to the fantasy stuff.
I am a goblin or hoarder. I love goblins. It's just my thing. I love elves and goblins.
Nice. Well, there will be elves too in starting in issue 2 of Snowpaw. There's an elf, there's a steampunk dwarf, so just that's future stuff. But
my logo is an elf, so
I see that. Yeah.
So it's an adorable, cute elf. It was dirt cheap to hire somebody to do it. Super happy with it. But anyhow, I digress right there. So obviously, the Dark Covenant has a lot more resources, and they're going after Snowpaw.
So with the resources, as far there's there's sections in different regions of these Dark Covenants throughout the world, and they typically are creatures of power who've managed to accumulate and use man's sinful sides to gain such power, and then they hide amongst the mankind, and they not only accumulate wealth, they accumulate power. They have influence across the nations and in different in corporations and stuff like that. Whereas like the Monokai, are they're a little bit more, they're more honest. Or the purebreds are more honest. They don't steal things. They don't influence. They're just kind of like getting by on their own, and so they're basically like the money that they may get or is basically from like slaying an evil creature who may have something on them and then pawning it. So in a lot of their stuff are like makeshift, or for example with Snowpaw, she has like these different safe houses throughout the country where she stays, or has like a working relationship with like churches or other places that kind of like maybe harbor her, but doesn't necessarily have like a place all her own, except for maybe like a cave or something that she might have set up like a dwelling.
So let's talk about Snowpaw, because obviously Snowpaw is the foil to the Dark Covenant. Obviously, the Dark Covenant's leader is a vampire who winds up kidnapping Rodney's girlfriend and has a plan for her. And obviously, I'm assuming it has something to do with targeting the Monokai and also possibly the human world. I think is a natural assumption.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of selfish reasons for him kidnapping Jen. Basically,
he needs a bride.
Yeah. So, she is perceived as the reincarnation of his former lover before he was a vampire, and so the fact that he kind of has taken this interest in her also kind of takes him away from what he's supposed to be doing. So that's going to have a ripple effect later on in the story, where it's going to affect his power as well as his seat of power, if you will. And so that it's basically him taking his eye off the ball and pissing somebody else higher up. So he it's kind of like a no-no, but it is kind of what it is at that point.
And so obviously there's a lot of moving parts here, and this is why I wanted to talk about it. And then we get into Snowpaw, and obviously Snowpaw is kind of Rodney's support system in a lot of ways. Snowpaw also is sort of the information breacher to the reader. Snowpaw, she is also a trainer. She's also support. She's also another ally in this fight. And obviously, what is that like? Because Snowpaw gives us a lot of insight into, okay, what's going on here with this lack of information being relevant, because we're walking in and we don't know who the Dark Covenant is. All we know is that they're going after, and then Snowpaw sort of fills us in on some information, as well as fills Rodney on information, and also provides insight in the fact that, okay, Rodney is Monokai, but he's also something else at the same time. And then issue 5 is that training montage. Not spoiling anything because it's sort of in the Kickstarter.
Yes.
That's going on right now.
Yeah. So she, just from her experience, obviously the fact that he's being attacked by the Dark Covenant is enough for her to get involved and help him. Because the fact that he's kind of like he's different, he may be one side or the other or not. He's that in between. She, being a purebred, being good, she wants to trust more, but still has that little bit of like, okay, well, I'm going to keep that at the back of my mind that something may be different here. But the fact that he's being attacked, she helps him. And the fact that too that like if they're attacking him but not to take him out but to capture him to then turn him to their side could be an entirely worse situation as well. It's kind of like if you will, like the with Star Wars, the dark side and the light side. You have those who like ride that really they kind of err in the middle that can easily flip one way or the other. I mean, you could either have a Luke Skywalker situation or an Anakin Skywalker situation.
Yeah.
So she felt that it's kind of like she needs to help tip the scales in her direction, considering right now she's one of the only ones remaining on her side. Whereas, like as you mentioned, the Covenant has a lot more resources and numbers, and so she feels that if she were to kind of help him in this journey and to train him and teach him the ways of the purebreds, then, it'll also help, keep him down the right path, which he could easily, like I said, his moral compass isn't exactly one way or the other.
and at this point, I mean, obviously issue 5, they're going to a safe house. I'm presuming they're going to get some weapons. I'm presuming there's going to be some training that's about to take place and go down as well. And then on top of that, now we're sort of getting that entire thing. So what can people expect with issue 5? Because I don't know if we're going to get into the fight per se with the Dark Covenant and Lord Malice, who's the vampire. And I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story.
Yeah, there's a lot more to the story. Issue 5 is not one of those going to reveal a lot. I mean, I think it's going to show, like I said, the training montage. It's also going to introduce a little bit more.
I'll throw out a term. So I like guns, and there's an idea that you cock the hammer, meaning that you're getting ready, or you load a bullet in the chamber, meaning you shoot it yet. And this isn't politics, but I think everybody can get it that you could get something ready to be shot out.
Yes.
That's sort of what issue 5 is to some degree.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's basically it's pulling the trigger or cocking the hammer back, to get ready to pull that trigger. And so from issue 5 is a lot. It gives you more information in a little bit, opens up the world a little bit more. It shows kind of like that Batman Begins kind of a, starting training, getting into stuff. It also introduces a little bit more of what the humans who do know stuff, what they're doing with some creatures, it's also, and then opens up a little bit more of like the Dark Covenant's plans for, or more specifically Malice's plans for.
So to even go off of that, because I don't want to go too much into the story, because I want people to back it. Links up above, everybody, in the description. If you're watching on Facebook, it's down on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitch, go to YouTube or Facebook to find the link. But one of the things that I think is important is that obviously issue 1 you need to capture a reader. Issue 2 you need to still hook a reader, because unfortunately what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this happens with mainstream comics. I read a lot of Kickstarter, read a lot of indies. I'll read a first issue. I got no problem taking a risk on a first issue. But then if I don't like that first issue and I had to drop somebody's book because I'm like, oh, this first issue isn't that good. I was happy that I took the risk on it, but I wasn't impressed with it. And so now I'm not back for issue 2, but you could still lose a reader in issue 2. But once you get past issue 2, it's hard to lose a reader on issue 3, 4, 5. And so at that point, you could still lose readers if the story doesn't progress, but that's when you need to open up your world a lot of ways. So how important is it to have pacing with issues? And I had the privilege of reading issues 1, 2, 3, and 4 in all in one sitting. And then I'm also a bulk reader. I am not a single issue reader. I really like reading graphic novels and more, and I like sitting down. And I have a Comixology subscription, and I like reading like 15 issues in like an hour and a half.
Right.
Next day, because I want more of a story. And so for me, and I don't know how Nightwolf was released per se, but obviously how important is pacing, because when you're doing a Kickstarter and you're doing one of these every 3 months or every 2 months, obviously you're not Marvel, you're not DC, and they pace a very different way, especially with like certain events that are going on, or even monthly pacing is different than 3 times a year. So what is that like that you're now having the cock the hammer issue? Because it is important for your fans that now are completely indoctrinated to become further invested and dived into, especially when you're going into issue 6. And I don't know how many issues you have planned. And if you're going to have a spin-off of Snowpaw as well, it is important that more information is massively revealed.
Yeah, so there is 12 issues of this particular story arc. And, the way that it progresses, like, so I kind of like, as in like issues 1 through 3 kind of it was a lead up, and then 3 had a lot of action. And so it kind of is the same, like, so 5 and 6 were like more, it was kind of more like 1 and 2, and then 6 will be more action. And then like with 7 on it's just nonstop. Like once 6 hits, it's nonstop. Like that's, like you said, it's, once that trigger's been fired, it's going. And then issue 12 to the resolution. And then that story arc ends as like a season 1, for this particular, story. And then, it'll move on from there into another story arc. So I have plans for it to go as a long, ongoing season or series with so for me, like, I felt like the pacing had to be enough where it was like, okay, it had to give enough information to be interesting, and then end each issue with a cliffhanger to want them coming back for more. So like I had to time it just right where there was that cliffhanger on it, on the last page. And then so that, because I know there was time in between, for me, like it took a while for me to kind of get going. And so it's been like a snowball effect. It started slow and now it's going faster. And, here I am on 5. So, making sure that like keeping that pacing, and the first 3 issues were more of like a horror kind of pacing too. If it was in like, a movie, you had to kind of keep that same kind of like pacing too, to keep the suspense and the interest, and then, then the boom, so that a lot of that had kind of played on to, between panels and page turns, and, like I said, and issue ends for that cliffhanger to move into the next, and then, for people to keep wanting to digest it.
And also, one of the things, indie books are complicated to do that with for a lot of reasons. Obviously, if you don't have a publisher and you're on Kickstarter, timing is crucial.
Right.
Meaning that, every 3 months is very intense to put out a book. I know people who put out a book twice a year, and there are people who can put out a book every 3 months. And obviously, it is crazy intense to do it.
Right.
I know because I'm running a project that is extremely weekly. I'm doing 4 interviews a week, sometimes 5.
Oh, wow.
Consistently, I would imagine it is extremely similar to the amount of pressure that
Mhm.
putting out a Kickstarter is. And if you don't think it is, if you're I put out, trying to do the math in my head, I put out like 50 interviews in 3 months. And then the amount of writing that goes into it, the amount of planning, it
Yeah.
is very similar. It's not the same. I'm not saying it's the same, but it is similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
And
you're putting in the time for sure, and like what,
it's a lot of pressure, and
yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts.
Mhm.
And when you're doing such volume, and I would imagine that, I don't know what your pacing looks like, but even having the back end handled, because what people don't understand is that when you're doing a project like what I'm doing with the podcast and doing this many interviews in a short amount of time, the back office and the front office are very, very complicated. And
And very different.
it can be exhausting in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And it's also a lot to run a Kickstarter, And after speaking to so many people, I did 90 people last year, and I would say about 60% of them were on Kickstarter. Doing similar numbers with 150 this year, where at least 50, if not 75, are Kickstarter related projects. So I have an idea of how intense it is. So
Right.
what is that like? And then on top of that, doing a 12 issue run is complicated because most people do 6 issue runs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Six is
So,
kind
yeah.
of
I mean, it's definitely a very ambitious goal for me. Because again, growing up with comics, I'm used to reading serialized single issues. That's how I prefer to read. I've gotten graphic novels of past issues, from like, the X-Men or whatever, like to see story arcs that I wasn't around for, and so, it's a lot of it for me, like that's how I wrote the book because that's how I experienced it. You know what I mean? So that's how I wanted to, to put it out there.
And there are advantages and disadvantages.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
when you do 12 issues, something could happen to you, something could happen to the writer.
Right.
Ideas change. Even trends change. And I mean, there's a whole discussion that we're going to get into about Kickstarter a little bit later. But obviously, that's also a big thing. And I would like to table that discussion. But even the idea that also people can lose interest, you could lose readership, you could gain readership too.
Yeah.
And versus 6 issues, which is a much shorter time period.
Yeah.
And so obviously there are advantages and disadvantages because also you have a bigger runway when you're doing 12 issues.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what your typical page count in a book is, but to use DC, what is it, like 22 pages?
Last I counted, I think like actual pages, not just like ads, was like 16 pages of story.
So fair enough. But
for me though, I do 24 pages of story.
So just I know graphic novels are usually like 156 pages for 6 issues in DC, around that number. And so obviously I would assume your graphic novel 6 issues is around that number. I think is a safe assumption.
Yeah.
And so
for issue 4, I want to say that because I had over 150 pages of story and art, so like pinups and stuff too, in there. So I want to say it was 120 pages or so of the story that I had put into the trade for issues 1 and 4, or 1 through 4.
I was about to ask about that because how are you breaking up your trade? Because when you're doing 12 issues, it's a different trade breakup in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So for the 12 issues, I'm dividing it into 4 issues. And so there's going to be 3 volumes for this story arc. And then eventually I'll do since it's a 12 issue story arc, I'll do a 12 issue omnibus for it, for the people who want the whole thing all in one big chunk. And so that's how I have it broken up. Because it also is kind of like within that 12 issues, there's sections to the story. Like, the first 4 issues are, this is the beginning where he finds out and is like, now, it has to then move into the section 2, which is volume 2 would be basically his learning period. And volume 3 is, going after and shit hitting the fan.
And then even to talk about graphic novel stuff, because what a lot of people do on Kickstarter is that if they're doing a 6 issue or a 12 issue, they do 4 and then they'll put out the graphic novel because, the key to a lot of this, and DC does it, I do it, everybody who's creating something, the key to creating something is learning how to recycle your content. Out of these interviews, I can get anywhere from 10 to 50 pieces of content very, very cheaply. And I only have to record the interview once, and I can put 50 pieces out of it, which is phenomenal. And that's just on one platform. I could put 50 pieces out on YouTube, 50 pieces out on Facebook. And when you put something to a graphic novel, obviously that is a whole recycling component, also catches people up. As I stated before, I'm very much a bulk reader. And so I appreciate bulk reading just because I want more of a story all at once. Right. It's easier for me to get into it and say, okay, I got 156 pages. Let me sit down for the next hour and a half and, man, what the hell's going on with Rodney? And I get my answers to questions when that happens. Right. And then, because sometimes I won't back single issues with projects, but I'll back a graphic novel. And I'm like, I love your work and I really enjoyed this, but I'm not backing issue 5 because you're going to put out a graphic novel and I'm more interested in the story. Right. And so sometimes that's how I am with certain projects. So obviously I was curious about that. And is there a graphic novel of the first 4 issues out yet? Yes. Because I don't know where you broke it up yet.
Yeah, exactly. So it is available. Well, I ran one in October for the trade for issues 1 through 4, and you could also pick up that in the add-ons of this current campaign. There's a hardcover with a die-cut claw, where you can see the werewolf over top of a vellum, overlay, and then underneath that is the human face, and then there's also the soft cover, and then there's a Virgin variant soft cover for the trade that has 152 pages.
So what is that like? 'Cause that's kind of a new thing, and I know Barnes and Noble has exclusive covers in their graphic novels. I know other stores do the same thing. I know that's new on Kickstarter in a lot of ways. Yeah. It is not a old thing. These variants have been around in regular single issues for a while, but there has not been variants in graphic novels. And in trade paperbacks, obviously I speak about Travis Gibb. He's coming on tomorrow for those who want to watch that interview around 7 o'clock. But he did a bunch of cool variants. He had 2 or 3, and one of them was like a glow in the dark. And people say print is dead, but I think print is in a more valued element stage.
Yeah, I think too, if you experiment with it more too, like that, it also becomes its own piece of art.
Glow in the dark stuff is cool. I mean, it's kind of cool when your book glows in the dark and that only certain elements glow in the dark, and then you put it in front of the sun or like under light for like 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Turn it off, and then you see a new cover.
And a fun fact about Travis. He actually, so in my trade paperback, I invited 4 different writers to write 4 pages as like an insert into each issue. And Travis did one for issue 3 or chapter 3 in the graphic novel, which was it was a fun part where we introduced kind of like the Seraphim and then like a warlock battle, kind of like entwined with a battle with Tartarus, my demon villain.
And so obviously I think it is super interesting to have that type of stuff out there. And also even having just the cover B, because I've seen people do cover Bs for the same price. I've seen Virgin, different pricing, hard covers, because, I love hardcover books on certain things. There's a reason why I have certain books in hardcovers versus other books not in hardcovers,
Right.
I like having things that look nice on the shelf.
Yeah. And I think too, like, if you have, because for a while there was the hard and the soft, and typically they were the same cover. But I think, like if you're going to do a different process, why not experiment and make it different?
Yeah, and I also like the fact that, people like reading a soft cover, and it's just like a throwaway book for them, and they're like, hey, I'm not interested in so much
Mhm.
having this where I want to read it, I want the book to be nice, but I'm more interested in the story. And then there are people who say, hey, I like the concept of this story. The art looks cool, and I want this book to be preserved
Right.
because I think we all know that a hardcover book is going to be more preserved than a soft
Oh
cover,
yeah, yeah, for
but
sure.
for the most part.
Mhm. Unless you're an avid collector who knows how to treat a book. You're not going to give it to your kid and like flip it around and throw it in the back.
That is true. That is true. That is true. Or you got to go kill a spider because it's hardcover books. I know somebody who thwarted a criminal with a hardcover book. It's a really funny story
That's
because
hilarious.
it's funny because he was successful. That's
Nice.
why it's funny. It's
That,
not
that's
funny.
even better.
It would have been really funny if you failed, but that's not the point here. But anyway, obviously, I do want to talk a little bit about what we spoke about earlier and why I threw this art degree out there because you're not the artist on the book.
Right. But I am
Carlos,
the
yeah,
letterer.
you're the writer. I think you put the publisher hat on. You're the guy running the Kickstarter, and obviously Carlos Herrera, or I'm sure I'm going to be corrected on how to say his
Herrera.
last name. I'm not going to get it. I'm not even going to try.
That's
So
all right.
obviously Carlos is the illustrator,
Mhm.
but what is that like for you as the writer that you have at least some art knowledge? And I'm not dissing any writers here, but you obviously went to art school,
Mhm.
which means that you have at least some understanding of what it means to go through art school, to experience art school, and to try to be an artist because sometimes writers don't understand that, and I would imagine you do.
Yeah, so the way I work with Carlos and my colorist Gat Melvin, who also does stuff for Tom Hutchison through Big Dog Inc. So I start off working. I'd use Trello, which is a project management tool online, and I create boards for each page. And Carlos will put up his sketch or roughs, and I'll kind of like talk that through with him. It's whether it's right or not. I do have an eye for what looks right as far as like anatomy. I took an anatomy drawing class. So I do have that background, and so I also was in like a 3D animation, so I know like backgrounds, like how the angles of the buildings and stuff look at different camera shots. Um, so it's easy for me to be like, all right, this is how the angle should be, and if a camera was looking at it, so like a lot of my scripts are written like if it was like done in camera angles,
Right.
and so sometimes I'll ask to tweak or whatever. I'd say probably like 75% of the time he's spot on. I don't have to do anything, and then like that other 25% there might be a panel here or a position.
Everybody does it differently. I know
Yeah,
that some writers are very hands off
yeah,
and they hand it and say, hey, look, I'm looking for this. And they give a description on certain things
mm-hmm.
and they back off on other things. And then there's people who say, hey, what do you think on this idea? And somebody throws something. And then I know that I was speaking to somebody and they had an argument about a splash page in a book. And he had to convince his artist, and his artist was like, "Oh, now I get it." And the artist understood. And I can say it because it's public and not bashing an artist, but the idea is that sometimes somebody says, "Hey, I have an idea here. I know what we're doing," and then sometimes an artist says, "Look, that's just not doable."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah. I mean, there are situations where like some panels could be combined into a better like shot. And with Carlos, he's really good. Like he's very invested in the project. Like so he will offer up some artistic advice, and he would be like, I think I could do it better if I do it this way, or if I take this panel and this panel, or break this one into a two panel. So like we do have those conversations, and oftentimes he's right on the money if that works out that way. But then sometimes there's particular shots that like for mood or like for the pacing that I'm like, no, it has to be this way because it's leading up to
yeah.
this.
I know the exact thing. So I used to run a website. It's still up there, and I would write in particular styles. And Was it grammatically correct? No, but the reason why I was writing something a certain way is because it adds a flavor. Was it the best way it was supposed to be written? No, grammatically incorrect technically, but
Mhm.
brilliant for what I was trying to get the point across. Because sometimes a grammatically incorrect sentence gets the point across because we don't speak perfect grammar. You know?
Exactly, and that's just it. Like,
And
it's one thing
so
to like have grammar particularly punctuated and whatever accurately for like paragraph or story form, but when somebody's talking, they don't typically, especially if they have an accent, they don't talk perfect English. You know?
and so I think it is important where like my mom used to edit a bunch of my stuff and like me and her had a very big argument, and then after I convinced her and the article was well received by a bunch of people and in particular that section because the way I wrote it, even though it's an informational article, got to the point a lot quicker and it hit
Mhm.
in a better way.
It was
Because
more interesting at it as
it,
well.
it, it also highlighted the point really, really well, where you
Mhm.
instantly got it. Where if we went the other way around, it would have taken a whole another paragraph to get it.
Right.
And it's nothing against my mom, and it's nothing against an editor, but sometimes that has to happen. The
Yeah.
reason why I'm bringing the story up is because sometimes you could make a point that doesn't seem, and I would imagine with comics, it's the same thing, where an artist is like, this isn't a good idea, but you're like, trust me, because then, like, oh, now I get it looking
Mhm.
backwards, that you were making a 5-page point in legitimately one panel.
Right. Right.
And this is why now we can actually use those other 5 pages for something else. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
and some people are just everybody works differently. I have never written a comic before, but I know that every writer and artist works differently. Where some are very hands off, some are very on, some leave interpretation for artists. Others say, "Look, I want it this way, and I'm telling you exactly what to draw and how to do it." Okay, you could put a tree on the left or the right. That doesn't matter to me,
Mhm.
but you need to have Batman front and center in this panel. He needs to be in the center. He cannot be off to the side. And
Right.
Superman has to be on the right or Superman has to be on the left. And there's no interpretation beyond that. So I was curious about that because being an artist and having that art background,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously you're probably a lot more sensitive to that when an
Mhm.
artist has to make determinations and calls on.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, most of the time, like I like it's usually the way that I want it, and if he suggests something, then well, we'll talk about it, and if I think it's better his way, then I definitely agree with it. We don't really argue too much about it, uh, because I know he as an artist, he too like has that vision as well, and and then like colors too. It's a whole another thing.
Oh, well,
Bringing
yeah, yeah.
colors too. So like oftentimes the mood lighting has to be right too. And I've actually had to go back and like forth a couple times and say with Gat will bring his pass on it, and I'm like, no, it's got to be this way because of the time of day or because of the lighting in the room or so it's one of those things too. Like I catch that knowing that there should be a light source somewhere or there should be a mood from the feeling or something. And in so like he usually does his passes and then I do like a checklist of things that I want him to make adjustments to, which is, like I said, it's nice having Trello for that. And then for me, like I like to be able to have that final edit whenever I'm doing the lettering. Because if something had changed from like whenever Carlos made that adjustment that he and I may have talked about, I might have to switch some of the words around or word bubbles in different places, or maybe it might have slightly changed something. But, or like you said, it's the fact that I have 12 issues written and times change a little bit. Like I, may have to tweak one or two small things in there. So I like having that final look at it when I'm putting the lettering in there.
And obviously, I mean, we could go on about lettering and all sorts of crazy stuff that goes on. Letters do not get enough credit. I can tell you that in comics. They do not get enough credit. And I have comics signed by the letterers because they were just in a comic shop for Archie. signing at a local comic shop, and it's cool to have a letter signing something too. And he was
Oh
happy.
yeah, because their name's in the book too. They get credits.
I was happy. I was like, hey, you want to say? He's like, yeah, I'll sign it. He's kind of a little shocked, and I'm like, well, why are you shocked? Like, you're here, and it's cool. But anyway, I digress right there. I do want to talk about the rewards because obviously there's a bunch of them. So obviously there is digital, and I love digital. I read a lot of digital comics. I have a Comixology subscription. I got an iPad for Christmas. Okay, changed my life. It's the simplest thing that's ever changed my life. The first thing, and no, it's not porn. It's my Xbox One X. That thing changed my life too. In so many ways, so many ways. I didn't play video games for 10 years, and then I just got back into it. Phenomenal. Oh man, I can't live without it. The two things that changed my life is my iPad and my Xbox One X. But anyhow, I read a lot of digital comics, and I love digital. And you offer this book digitally. You offer a digital catch-up for all 5 issues, and maybe some other stuff digitally as well. Yeah. So what is that like to offer digital? Because I think digital has been very much underlooked all throughout up to about 2020. And there have been debates on this topic in Facebook groups, and people were not prioritizing digital. I'm like, why would you not prioritize digital? It is the cheapest, fastest, and easiest thing to sell, and it costs you pennies. It costs you fractions of pennies to do it.
Yeah, no, I think digital, like, it's definitely a medium that people want for sure. I mean, I have, backers who I refer to as my Wolfpack. I have Wolfpack members who will.
Is Sting part of it?
I wish. Well, unless he's
Kevin Nash backing it up.
Yeah.
You should do a cameo and just like get Kevin Nash. Just send him a book with the cameo and just put it right on your Kickstarter, and you will do like an extra 10,000. Just do it. Just like the $150 will be the best $150 you will ever spend.
Well, I have a funny story. Speaking of Kevin Nash, if you want to circle back to that later, so remind me to tell you about that. But yeah, so like with the digital, it's better to like I said, you'll have people who read the digital but still keep the books for like the collectors.
That too happens, and I'm similar to that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, and it makes sense because you can read the digital anytime without ruining it or touching the pages or whatever. If you keep the book,
or the digital is more transportable.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm not taking my entire stack of comics with me somewhere.
So I sometimes travel, and I haven't been on a plane in a long time due to COVID. But next time I'm on a plane, I am legitimately going to be downloading a bunch of things off of Comixology, with my iPad on it. And if I'm on a 6-hour plane, boy, I got 6 hours of comic time to read on a plane.
Yep.
And it's great. And then it's the same thing with, anything else with that's digital. So obviously I like digital. I also like the fact that, it's transportable. And I think that, it's just easiest. And we have now like 4K iPads. And if you have really good art and you have art that's like popping off in your book, I mean, why wouldn't you want it on like a high-res iPad?
Exactly. I mean, it's definitely short-sighted if they're not thinking about digital. Because
I think everybody now is. I think it's clear because we're in a digitalization pivot.
Yeah, we live in a digital world.
I've been podcasting for 7, almost 8 years now, and I got in late, early 2015, and I've been doing it for a long time now. And obviously, I have a very big digital library between 3 shows, and now my 4th show is being built out, and I have a huge library. I think I have almost 600 episodes between all 4 shows.
Oh, wow.
And so obviously, and then I have a big YouTube library of content that's 10 years. And so that's the thing about digital as well, is that content library is massive. And then on top of that, being on Comixology and Spin, whatever it is, and other digital platforms, I mean, those things are global now. And I don't know what the breakdown is, but you could be selling to people in Japan, be selling to people up in
Oh yeah.
Canada. I don't know where you live exactly, but I live in Connecticut. And obviously, when I'm picking up your book, and if it's on Comixology, I could be in California, I could be in Connecticut. I could have never met you,
Yeah.
but I could have just said, "Hey, what's an interesting comic?" And
Yeah.
I throw it in the group, somebody says, Nightwolf. And I'm like, great, I'll pick up the first issue for $1 also. And that's the other thing, too, that I think is super important, is that you don't have to print the book, and then now for your second issue, you could charge me $5 because you got me in that first issue for $1, or you made it free, which is the other thing, too, that I'm now starting to see that I think is underutilized. Give me a free copy of it digitally, and then if you have 12 issues more, charge me for those 12 issues.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, once you get, if you give that first book, and I do that typically, I'll give out my first issue. I have a landing page where you can sign up for my email list, and you'll, get the download the first issue digitally for free. And that's basically, a good way to introduce people. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, then okay, they can unsubscribe. There's no monetary transaction. If you enjoy the book, then you continue on. It's a good way to introduce people to new series whenever you do things like that. And, what's nice too about like the way I do digitally on my campaigns is I also include digital rewards. Like whenever I do a physical like pinup print, I'll give people the digital wallpaper version of that, or that way they can put it on their phones for their, or computers.
You also with your books, and correct me if I'm wrong, you include a digital copy with the book, and I don't know why more campaigns don't do that, and I think it's ridiculous when they don't.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, people will read that digital and keep the book pristine. I mean, for me, it's like, yeah, here you go. You got the book, you got the digital. There you go.
I'm not gonna. There's one Kickstarter, and I love who it is, and I'm not gonna say who it is because I don't want to speak ill, because I still like him. But it's the idea that he doesn't include a digital copy of his book, and I'm picking up a $25, $30, $50 variant. I picked up a $50 variant. I am not opening up that book. Now,
right?
I think you know who it is. We're not saying, and we're not speaking ill of who this is. So there's about 5 people who this could be, technically. There's some ambiguousness going to it.
I won't pry on who it is. I'll let you.
But I bought a $50 variant and happy with my purchase. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not opening up that book. But I want to read the story. But I'm also not opening up my $25 copy either of the book. Right. And I'm like, okay, like, what do I do?
Where's the digital?
Why can't you just give me a digital copy so I can enjoy the story?
Especially for that much. I mean, it's it makes sense. Like when you do limited print runs to charge a little bit more for a variant cover. It makes sense. I do that, but give them the digital. Like it's not really like you said. It doesn't cost you more to do that.
Even when you do the variant, I just want a digital copy with it so I can read it. Like
exactly.
I want to be able to read the story too, but I don't want to ruin my nice copy.
I don't want to put fingerprints on that $25 to $50 copy.
Because it becomes a collector's item.
Exactly, and that's why it's limited. So for that reason,
it's a 50 print run for $50, and I'm not gonna open it. I'm opening it once to take a picture to put up on Instagram, and that's the end of it. Yeah. But anyway, there's a bunch of other rewards too. Obviously, Carlos has a regular cover, and then Thomas Tenley has a cover, and I'm hoping this is the right one on this. Yeah. Yes, I got it right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for those who don't know, Thomas Tenley has done some comic work, I think back in the 90s, did a bunch of covers. Then he's done a bunch of concept art and album art for groups like AC/DC and I think a few others. And so now he's making his rounds in the comic realm. And so I know he's done stuff for Chuck Pinu. I know that he's done stuff for other people. I'm trying to think. There's like 4 or 5 people he's done work for. Obviously, at some point, hopefully I'll be able to get him on. this show to talk about it, because there's a lot to talk
Oh
about.
yeah, he's a super nice guy, and he's very supportive of indies, because he feels like that indies are also kind of like the future too. If you don't give somebody in that chance, who could possibly be the next Marvel or DC writer or illustrator,
And so what was that like? Because obviously getting that cover, getting this,
mhm,
artist to do it, and what he's doing on the indie scene, and now he's making his rounds.
mhm,
Like a Steph Wilson, I want to say, and a Stan Yak. There's some indie guys coming out
yeah,
now who are not associated with big names. I know that Jamie Tyndall does a bunch of stuff, but Jamie Tyndall's obviously a bigger name. Sun Kubanaki's a bigger name. Ebass does some stuff. Dawn Mateague does some stuff. For Lady Death, and all of those people, they've all been on my show at one point or another. That's why I can say this, but they're all associated with bigger companies like DC, Marvel,
mhm.
Rothic Comics, Zenescope. Thomas Tenley is much like the Steph Wilson, Stan Yak, group, where those are the guys that are really making the indie circuit. And it's important to have an indie circuit guy on your book right now.
Mhm. Yeah, so the introduction to Thomas, like I got his Force Works books back in the '90s. I have a couple of those, and I've seen a lot of his Iron Man. Like, matter of fact, his Iron Man design is like my favorite Iron Man suit. And I have the action figure from the series in the '90s. So that style was always like my favorite version of Iron Man. And but fast forward to like last year, I actually won a inked drawing of the Creep Show host, that he drew, and I won that through Matt Knowles and Steph Cannon. They had him do a cover for them for one of their, I believe, is Heirs of Isildur campaigns, and I happened to win that drawing. And so then I tagged him on Facebook, and I thanked him, and I asked him to be friends, and he actually accepted. So like from there, I was following him along. He talks a lot about being in, because he's an industry veteran from like you said, the '80s and '90s on. And then like the rock and roll scene. I mean, that's for me. Like I was in the rock scene myself. And I had a band as well, and so like that's like all things that interest me is like the stuff that he does, and following that along, he tells all these stories about people he's worked with, about his idols working in the industry. So I would comment on his posts, and kind of like just like I say, he's a nice guy to talk to, and he replies to almost everybody who comments. So if it was at that point where I was like, what, I was like, I really want to get his art. So hey, worst thing he could say is that he didn't have the time or no, right? So I asked him, and he graciously agreed, and he and I talked, and we messaged each other back and forth. Like it's so I can genuinely say that he's a nice guy. I love talking to him. I'm glad that we've become friends, and I'm very honored to have his art as part of my project.
Yeah, and obviously it is important, I think, in a lot of ways that artists do give back. I also think it's important that, when projects do have people like Thomas Tenley on them or Steph Wilson, because there are people who are variant collectors. And
Mm.
obviously you're charging, I think, 20 for it.
Yeah.
And so obviously when somebody's paying $20 for a variant, I'm a Zenescope guy, and their 350 print runs are $20. So obviously the reason why I bring this up is I'm a comic book investor. That was my no. It's a thing. I was speaking to somebody who sells 15 to 20,000 every Sunday night with comic
Right.
books. He's
Which
got a book that he's going to be selling for like $6,000 next Sunday.
oh,
And so that it's a Hulk 181. And so obviously I speak to a lot of people. I buy and sell a lot of comics. Not to that level. I am at a very different level, but it is increasing. I
right.
actually made a very expensive purchase for new merchandise. I tend to sell in volume, and I might be getting into something with indie comics possibly tomorrow.
Very nice.
So it could be very interesting what's going on. But I am in that sector, and I think it is important because people are also betting on that now in the indie comic world. And people want variants, and they want to pay $20, $30, $40
Yeah.
for books. And so it is important. And people who want this, they're not buying it necessarily for your book. They're buying it for his art. And they're buying it because it's his art on your book, and it's his interpretation of your characters and what's going on. And that's very, very cool. And people say, hey, I like this thing, what's going on. I like these characters, and I like him as an artist. And
what's nice about that art that he did for that cover is he said, he kind of alluded to this, that there are Easter eggs in there, particularly the witch behind the demon character. I actually thought it was kind of like a nod to Scarlet Witch, which he said no, she's actually a new character that's in development now. So I was like, ooh, now I really got to kind of like look into this.
And then talking about more and more covers, obviously this one, Chris Williams, and this is a cool one that's out there. And then also this one with Hedwin Zalvidar. If I got that name right, because again,
I'm terrible with names too. So I mean that would be what I would, especially with my dyslexia. That his last name is a nightmare for me. But
I'm not good at names. I think I reached out to Hedwin. I don't know if Hedwin got back to me, but that's okay. People don't get back to me all the time, and I have way too many people knocking on my door.
He's very slow at getting back to people because he is a very sought after, busy artist. Like he's constantly putting out new work, and I would just happen to be lucky that he got back to me. But it did take some he was very when I would ask, hey, I'm looking for an update, how's it going? It would take him like a week or two to get back to me. So like he's just so if he hasn't got back to you yet, I'm just maybe ping him.
The way it works in my world is I circle back to people like 3 months. Sometimes it takes me years to circle back to people. I just got the ability to circle back to Michael Dooney, of all people, from 4 years ago. That's how busy I am.
I get that.
My interviewing. When you're doing 4 to 6 interviews a week.
For sure.
And I already have 2 booked for next week, and it's not even Thursday yet when I schedule all my interviews. So obviously I have a lot of stuff going on. I was supposed to have 6 interviews this week. I only had 5. That should give you an idea of how busy I am as an individual. Because the person who's supposed to show up didn't show up today before you. It's not your fault. It's their loss, and we move on. And I have 3 tomorrow. But anyway, even going back to this, because obviously, what is that like to catch artists? Because people are busy, and I'm extremely busy. So what is that like? Because there's a lot of crazy good artists who are stupid good out there right now. Just go on ArtStation. Literally go on ArtStation.
Oh, yeah. You can get lost looking for artists.
You could legitimately go through the Overwatch skin artists. And there is, I think, like 100 of them. There's 100 different ones of them. And some of them work in comics.
Yeah.
Crazy. If you think about it, it is insane on ArtStation. You can legitimately find so many people to do work. And it's wild. And half of them are in the Philippines and in Russia and in Japan. And oh my God.
All over. I actually, Carlos is in Chile and Gat is in South Africa. And my colors for the Snowpaw book, she's in Brazil.
So it's crazy what's out there. And then I know also everybody can catch up on a bunch of different covers. I think people can catch up on older variant covers as well. I'm not going through all of them. I'm not.
I don't blame you.
This should give you an idea of what's out there.
There's 20 variant covers through all 5. So basically 4 per issue.
There's like a bunch of like mystery boxes. I think there's something with like a slab in it, and it's a random signed slab that should be a pretty decent high grade.
Yeah, just so a lot of them are like so this is just an example of one of the ones. This is issue 1, signed by me, and it's this one is graded at a 9.8. So this is one of the mystery possibilities that are inside that mystery box.
And then there's stuff like this, which is just the standard covers of, I think, the catch-up and the print catch-up. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's a lot of stuff like that. There's a bunch of different tiers. There's the Omega tier, the Alpha tier, the mystery box, the entire collection. I think you get a commission done by Carlos, I want to say.
Yep, Carlos. If for that one, you'll get pretty much all the books, the variants. You'll get basically everything. Like you'll get the apparel, and you'll even get this little Lego minifigure right here. With that, yeah. And then you'll get that Carlos commission, so you'll be able to get.
Oh, well, you may not be legally allowed to say Lego with me, but that's a.
Well, it's not really a Lego; it's a custom minifig.
You might not be legally allowed to say that either with who I know. Right? You get the problem is that you can say it with everybody else's podcast. With me, you may not be able to say it in the next.
Wait, just bleep me out.
Given who I know in that company. But that's a whole different discussion for a different day. And then obviously also being drawn into the book as well is always an option.
Yep. Yeah, that's there's actually been a couple. So I have 3 people who have been drawn into my series thus far. So one of them is a young boy whose dad got him into the issue as Agent Hammond. He's one of the 3 agents. And also the maid that shows up in the little time flash with Jen is she was also in there. And then in the issue 5 particularly, there is the Warlock character that's talking to Malice. He in the last got into the book for this issue.
And so obviously that's always cool with getting into books and being a part of it. And obviously I'm pretty sure that it's not that you just throw somebody randomly into it. I'm sure it's much more a collaboration.
Oh yeah. It's basically like I ask them what they want to be and what works with the story, because I don't want, obviously it's not going to change the story. To get, so it just has to fit in as well and make sure that they're happy with it and that they're happy with the art.
And then the other thing I want to talk about really quickly, and then obviously we're going to talk about Kickstarter, is this. And obviously, I know Daphne. I got to interview them a while ago, both her and I think her husband.
JD.
They do a lot of furries. I got to release that. I've been slacking. I am 40 deep into my other podcast, and editing is a long process. The way I edit, and I edit very slowly, and editing can be very expensive, and I am just way too far behind in editing. And given right now what's going on, and this show is taking precedent over that, so that will eventually be released. Super interesting interview though, nonetheless. And so obviously this is a cross promotion between your Kickstarter and her Kickstarter going on. And I think her Kickstarter, I think I have the name too, is
Ego.
Yes. Hair of the First Unicorn. And obviously you get the print if you back yours and hers. And I don't know who's checking what. I'm sure that if you send those.
So the way that works is that like when she does her fulfillment and I do my fulfillment, whoever fulfills first will basically ask if they backed, and then they ask for there's like a code, if you will, and then that code then gets brought to me, and then they share it. Then that we know who backs, so we'll cross reference each other, and we'll know who did it, and then
so it's a print. And it's a cool print, and it's this idea, and cross promotion with Kickstarters has been done before.
Mhm.
A bunch of people have done it in a bunch of different ways. Obviously, we've seen connecting covers with Greg Harms and Travis Gibb, which means I can't put this into somebody's group now.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's a different story for a different day, because I just mentioned a bad person's name, apparently, with Mojo Rising and Voodoo Nation.
Mhm.
So that's a form of cross promotion that Travis Gibb did.
Mhm.
There's been stickers with, I think, like Patriotica and some other stuff and
Mhm.
some other things. There's been, buttons on cross promotions. I've seen a four Kickstarter like promotion, cross promotion, which is a freaking nightmare. I
Oh yeah,
mean,
the logistics on that's insane.
also the expenditure onto the consumer is very expensive as well. And also I've seen cross promotions just fall flat on their head. And I personally, I think it's cool. I don't think it does any harm, but for me, it doesn't get me out of bed. It doesn't get me excited.
Mhm.
There are other things that get me excited about a Kickstarter, because I'm not gonna. To me, it doesn't benefit me because it's not. If I don't like your project and you're cross promoting with something that I don't like,
Mhm.
or it doesn't interest me, or it's not my
Right.
cup of tea, it's irrelevant to me. It
Right.
doesn't get
I
me
think the
excited.
cross promotion too has to be a right fit. You can't just have some random I couldn't do a cross promotion with somebody who's doing like a sci-fi Star Wars thing. It just doesn't make
I'll throw my friend under the bus. So Ryan Cummins has a book called Fever out. Fever is a cyberpunk book.
Okay.
It looks awesome. Your book and his book do not match up.
No, not at all.
It's a cross promote. Now, don't get me wrong. If you had connecting covers and your characters were thrown into a cyberpunk thing and his character was thrown into your book in a connecting cover, that
Mhm.
could work in a certain way to some degree if the artwork
It
is
has to be done
awesome.
right.
But also it's the idea though that your audience might be
Exactly.
interested in that,
Exactly. They have to
but
be interested in that.
but they also might not be versing, hey, if I have a book that is a Hunt for Red October book, and then somebody has a book like Matt Hawkins' Think Tank,
Mhm.
those books go together really, really well.
Right.
And now for cross promoting me and Matt Hawkins,
Mhm.
and I throw Matt down, and for a reason, because I've interviewed Matt and I get along with Matt Hawkins, and Matt Hawkins knows who I am, and I don't think he's going to mind. But the idea is that if I have a very military complex book, and he has a military complex book, and we're cross promoting, my audience is going to naturally flock to that book, and they might not have known that book existed. Like
Right.
with your book, like I didn't know Daphne's book existed
Mhm.
until I saw it, and I'm like, okay, if I'm interested in your book, chances are I'm going to be interested in her book.
Mhm.
But I've seen cross promotions that I'm like, yeah, like I don't get it. And also, but I do think it's important if it's done right. I don't think it hurts, but and I've seen it go in and out of Kickstarter in a lot
Mhm.
of ways where I saw it maybe the last time a year ago, and I haven't seen it all that much. And you're the first time that I've seen it in a while. So,
Yeah.
what is that like? Because obviously you've been around Kickstarter probably a lot longer than I have.
So I think it's kind of like a next level cross promotion when you do something like that. And for us, I don't want to do like where it's like it actually costs the backer much. I mean, if they're going to back it, they're going to back it anyway. Really, it's kind of just another way of saying, hey, if you like this and you like this, you get this too. You know what I mean? So it's just an extra freebie in my mind. That they get, whether they're digital or physical. So, again, they're going to get, the print's going to go to the physical backers and the digital wallpaper will go to the digital backers. And it's just an extra freebie and like you said, getting eyes on similar projects and helping friends out. It's how I see it. Right now I have 3 different cross promotions with similar genre books from different friends that I have going on, and and they're not all 3 of them won't be the same taste for everybody, but they they each cross like that line with my book that my backers may like their books and vice versa. So it's basically
Because
getting eyes on each other's projects.
obviously, I'm going to speak about Greg Harms, and people either like him or they don't. I have a feeling I sort of know where you stand because I know who you like, and I know certain people cut from the same cloth. But he has a position where it's not, Third Empire Studios is very much a collective approach to comics, where they work with a lot of people, and it's almost a gigantic label that encompasses a bunch of different other studios underneath them. And I view cross promotion in a similar way, where I think, unfortunately, because of Kickstarter, when we have bigger names coming in on Kickstarter, is that I think smaller publishers are going to actually have to almost create a union to some degree and go under very much like an Image 2.0 or an Image 3.0. And people laugh at me, and I threw this idea out there.
Well,
Like,
I think Scout might be actually doing it like that behind the scenes. They've been picking up.
so my issue with Scout though is that Scout I don't think is going to be able to pull it off. I don't think, and I understand what Scout's trying to do, but I don't think that Scout has the right management team behind it, and I don't have much faith in execution on Scout, because Scout, I get where they're going with it and what they're trying to do, but I don't think that they have the right, thing, and I also think that they have a foot in indie and they have a foot out of indie, and I think that's the problem. Versus a company like Image, which has a foot massively in indie. Image was founded on the concept of indie comics.
No, yeah, they're definitely the godfathers of indie for sure.
And also what's going on with Kickstarter is that, and me and Greg were talking about this, and we had like a 25-minute discussion on it live, and it could be witnessed because he was my last interview last Wednesday. And what we were speaking about on this show, at the very least, what we were speaking about is that 2020 was a very interesting year in Kickstarter. And Tom threw something to me, and from what I researched, I think he's correct. In 2020, there was more projects being funded on Kickstarter, and there was a higher success rate, and also bigger projects on. Now you have lesser projects on Kickstarter. The success rate is lower. Now, the issue is that, was 2020 the new norm, or is 2020 the bleep on the radar that happens once every 5 years, and we're now back into the 2021 where the success rate is lower and there's less projects? Because
the whole 2020 boom might have been because people were stuck inside and they couldn't get their books other places. I think it was kind of like a
you also think that with Keanu Reeves and Scott Snyder and a few other big projects, that also there was just a lot more money being pumped into Kickstarter, and there was a lot more attention, and that raises the question where, okay, you bring in a big superstar into something, they stick around, they bring a lot of attention, but then when they leave, the arena and they're not back for another year, all of a sudden, all the air they brought in leaves with them. Because people say, oh, Keanu Reeves was good for Kickstarter, Scott was good for Kickstarter, and I agree to some degree, but now we had more success, and then now that's dissipated, and we're not fully back out of COVID, where people are still at home. The first 5 months right now, now people are starting to go out, and con season is going to kick back up in July. So
I can't wait for con. Like my next con is in August. I'm going to be in Boston Fan Expo.
But I think it raises a really good question, where it's now like, okay, were Keanu Reeves and Scott Snyder really good for Kickstarter? Because they brought a lot of attention in a short amount of time, but then when they left and their next project isn't coming out for another 6 months, all that oxygen that they brought into the room. And look, most of it was going to them, but even if 10% was not going to them and going to a project like you, or was going to them and you, or to somebody else's project, now that's gone. And now that all left, which shows that they brought in a lot of press, they were a quick accelerant, but then now you're doing issue 2 and you're barely making it across, your goal. When before you were doing issue 1 and you were exceeding your goal by 50%. Like that's an issue. And I don't think the situation with COVID has changed all that much at the moment with Kickstarter. from last year. I don't. I think in 3 months it will.
Yeah. I think too, like, I agree to an extent. But I think like that, if like people they're in the platform, once they've, created an account, they have their information there, they're still getting the emails unless they opted out of the emails. So,
I agree.
there's still, I'd say probably there's maybe like 5 to 10% that are still getting notified, despite whether they're actually backing or not. They might be looking if there's projects that like are geared towards them, or if they're seeing the updates because, I still get the updates from that Keanu Reeves, campaign. So when, and they have the, you may also like this in those as well. So, I mean, it may, that like low number may still come back in that wasn't there before, in a sense.
Because this is the thing that I'm wondering about, because I was a strong believer saying, hey, Keanu Reeves and Scott Snyder, they have a right to be on, and who is anybody to tell that they don't have a right to be on, much like anything else has a right to be on Kickstarter if it follows their rules. And there's plenty of other things, like a Lady Death has a right to be on there, but then a project that only needs $1,500 also has a right to be on there. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, and I'm not saying that, Scott Keanu Reeves can't go and do it. That's not my issue. My issue, though, is that, okay, as an indie community, what do you guys now need to do? And I said, look, Pandora's box has been opened. And I think that whether it's good or bad, we don't know. But I do think that, it raises questions on, okay, if Scott is throwing out Nocturna, does everybody wait and then put their Kickstarter up either before that, in the middle of his, or after? And is this going to change the strategy of launching, or does that not matter anymore, or is that another approach has to be taken?
I think personally, I think not, relying on somebody else to launch isn't going to help you more than maybe 10% of your funding goal, if that. I think creators should see Kickstarter as the venue, and you need to bring the party. You need to invite the guests. You need
that is
to get
true.
the guests in. So, like doing like lives like this, doing, constant Facebook pushing, social, through like Twitter, Instagram.
Also, because I've noticed a change. So obviously I've been doing this for 2 years extensively on Kickstarter. I got a real education on Kickstarter. I never ran a Kickstarter, but I know a hell of a lot about it. Because when you talk to people, and again, I think I'm up to probably like 100 people who run Kickstarters in some form or other. And I know some people use it as a pre-order form. And I've known people who have used it as a pre-order form that are now using it as, okay, my book is 40% done, and I'm running my Kickstarter now, and now I've shifted. And so obviously I've seen a very interesting evolution in the last, I would say, 16, 17 months that I've been doing interviews. I started last March, so not even that. In the last 15 months, I've seen a very interesting shift throughout people and how they're using Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because it's gone from being a pre-order form for a lot of people to now being, hey, my book is 50% done, and this is what I got with my book, and it's getting done, and I can deliver. But now that's super interesting also on that shift. And people that I know that said, oh, I would never do it that way, are now doing it that way.
I refuse. I don't like the anxiety of not having the book done before I launch. That's why I make sure that my issues are done 100%. Because once it's done, in the funding, I can have the printer, because the proofs will be off to the printer. By that time, once the funds hit, go off and print. The books come in, it's within a couple of weeks, then, it helps the process move faster. It's less stress on me having to worry about, because if there's delays, then, that delay ends up being more of a stressor. And then, so
let's talk about that too, because obviously everybody's Kickstarter gets delayed. I've had Kickstarters that were supposed to be here a while ago, and I don't know where they are. I'm not bugging the people who are putting them out. it's not a big deal that it takes long for me, but it's annoying to some degree as well.
Mm.
You know, I
Well, look
under
at the Todd McFarlane figures. It took over a year for mine to get here. Now they're nicely displayed up there, but it took that long.
I mean, I couldn't afford those. I couldn't afford those, but I also have
That was my Father's Day and anniversary gift from my wife.
I have much stricter parameters on mine, where my stocks come first.
Mm,
I live a very hardcore economic lifestyle. I am the master of my money. My money is not the master of me.
there you go.
And also, I buy a lot of merchandise, and so there are a bunch of things that come first and foremost before I get to enjoy pleasure. Um, and I'm very good at it. And I'm very disciplined. So I just spent $560 on certain books, but those books are not for my collection. They are my merchandise.
Right.
So that comes first before I go buy a Todd McFarlane statue.
Which makes sense.
And I will make about 40% of those books in profit, probably within the next year, which is awesome. So it's not every single one of those things is a book.
Right.
Some of them are pleasurable items. They're really cool statues. If you're a fan of Jason Carty, you'll know what I'm talking about with his statue work is phenomenal. They were on sale though. I will say that. Got $35 off per statue that I bought. So it was a good deal for me.
Yeah.
But anyhow, even just delays, because obviously every Kickstarter gets delayed. I don't think I've ever had a Kickstarter that has arrived on time. There was a Kickstarter that I backed, I think, last November, I want to say. It was supposed to be shipped out in April. I haven't gotten it, and it's May. And I don't really know where it is. And I'm not going to say whose Kickstarter it is. And it's cool. It's cool. It's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm not worrying too much about it because I get that this shit takes time. But at the same time, I mean, I've been waiting a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it should be here by now.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar situation with my trades actually. So like it funded in November and it was supposed to ship out in March. But because of the delays with the printers, so because of the die cut and the vellum, basically because it was an experimental book, it took longer for them to figure out the process. They had to use a different die cut process. They had to end up using some sort of laser cutting and a different kind of screen printing. And then now they're they're on a boat on the way here. So, and I asked I keep my backers updated constantly. And so I'm telling them every step of the way. I'm showing them emails from the printer.
Because the reason why I bring this up is that there's a bunch of my friends who got into this and they said, oh, you shouldn't be starting a new Kickstarter until your current Kickstarter or your other Kickstarter, the rewards are sent out. And I'm like, what are you people talking about? There's a million reasons why you should start a Kickstarter when your rewards aren't being sent out. Because guess what? This is a good example of that. Or better yet, your book came in and then you launched on a Wednesday and your books came in on a Thursday and you're running a month-long campaign for your second book, and your books just came in the day before you launch and they're going to be out in a week.
Yeah.
It's okay to overlap. And like you were saying, it takes a lot of nerve to do that. And I'm like, wow. Like some people have a very narrow understanding because things get delayed. Things are on a boat. Your trade paperbacks are on a boat right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to get to you eventually, but it could just take a while because COVID happened.
Yeah, exactly. And they could be stuck at the port. But even so, I asked, and like I said, I kept my backers very, informed, and I sent pictures. I even have pictures of the actual physical book from the printer. I sent out a survey. I asked them what they wanted me to do, if they wanted me to hold off, because this book is 100%, ready to print. So for issue 5, and that's going to be printed domestically in the United States. So it'll take less time for it to be delivered. Just like my other single issues. And, so I said, what do you want me to do? I won't move forward if you don't want me to. I'll wait. Or if you want me to go ahead and do this, I'm ready to go whenever you want me to go. And 70% of my backers were like, do it ASAP. So, I was like, all right. So, and as an incentive for, like as a kind of like a thank you for their patience, I'm also giving those backers another free print that I didn't have in the campaign. It's just another free print to say thank you for your patience and your time.
Because and I don't get the argument. And look, I'm not, again, I am an outsider looking in who comments on all this stuff and does interviews. And I've backed less projects than a lot of other people. I think I've backed maybe 20, 25. And I know there are people who've backed 400. And obviously I'm very selective on what I back.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a whole philosophy where I tend to back projects that I know are going to fund, because once I back a project and I have 30 days, if it's a $60 project, that $60 is gone in my bank.
Right.
And so I have a different philosophy than other people. And so when I back a project and I'm in that situation with somebody's project right now where I don't know if they're going to fund. Now, I didn't lose $60, but it's budgeted. That's a surplus if it comes back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it's a very interesting mentality, because I'm very much a master of my money. My money's not a master of me.
Right.
So obviously, that, but I do think I didn't get that argument, and I'm like, there's a million reasons why. It could also be that legitly you are doing, a project that's just going to take a year to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want somebody who's got 4 other projects going on not to deliver, like, that have nothing to do with this other project? Like, or if you're putting together a hardcover book and, it could take a while.
Yeah, and like you said, and it's a revamping of previously, published books. So it's not, from this standpoint, yeah, I wish the books were here and they were out. But also this is the next chapter in that story that's already, has been waiting for a while. And like I said, I think they were, when I asked my audience, they were very hungry for this next chapter and they wanted it ASAP.
and so I just didn't get it. And people were very opinionated in that. And I said something. I said, hey, it depends on the book. It depends on the project. It depends on the person who's doing it. There are people who are involved in several anthologies, and they might be spearheading an anthology, or they might be co-spearheading an anthology, but then they have another book that has nothing to do with the anthology.
Right.
And the anthology and their other book are two complete separate things. So I just thought it was a little ridiculous. I also thought that some of these people are going to wind up in that situation, and they said I would never do it, but they're probably going to wind up doing it at some point, and I just know.
Yeah. I never thought I would be in that situation either, but like I said, if you ever find yourself in that, make sure you are very upfront with your backers. Show them step by step everything. Any information you get, new information to you, goes to them immediately. That's how it should be. Be upfront. Don't hide it. Don't freak out. Just say, hey, here's a situation. Be honest, and it is what it is.
Somebody's comics might have been stuck on the boat in the Suez. No, that's a story. If your comics were on that boat, oh, that would be phenomenal. I'm sorry, guys. The captain had a little too much to drink here. My bad. You might have been sneaking a copy of my book. But I digress, and I figured we should also talk about conventions. Mm-hmm. So obviously, right now, my last con I think was over a year ago. Mm-hmm. I'm going to eventually get back to going to cons, but I'm letting the dust settle personally. And I present on various topics, whether that's anime or comic book investing, or podcasting, things like that. And obviously, there's no money in panels, and I'm a hell of a lot more influential on here right now. I reach more people legitimately sitting in my kitchen than I do ever at an anime con.
Right.
Also, or Comic Con. Also, I don't know where it's going exactly, what changes are going to be put into place, how they're going to adapt. And I'm not saying they're dead, but I just don't know where the dust is settling at this point.
Right.
So where do you think cons are going from both a business perspective, from you as a comic creator selling your books, making connections, and even reaching new fans? Because I think obviously we are in a digitalization pivot,
Hmm.
and this podcast will get anywhere from 200 to 300 people watching it, and then it has massive replay value.
Right.
And I don't know, and then we're not even in person. Obviously, you're in your house, I'm in mine. And obviously we're both in very comfortable positions, and we're doing it on a Tuesday night. And you could do 3 or 4 of these technically a week,
Hmm.
and you might reach more people than you would at a con, and more people who might not have known who you are, and then people who are into my audience are watching you. And so, where do you think all this is going, and what changes do you think comic creators and people who are producing comics need to make?
Yeah.
Because clearly, COVID has changed the game.
Yeah. I mean, I still think cons are going to play a role. I don't think like people love going to them. And I think, I've seen actually like in the last 2 months that there have been cons, and I've seen a lot of people dressed up. I've seen a lot of people, selling. So, I mean, it's to me, the only difference is that they're a little bit cleaner, or at least they say they are, and people are wearing masks, which, it may be harder to sell because you can't sell with a smile, but that just means you got to get people's attention in a different way. For me, like, starting out, with my first 2 issues, cons played a vital role there. Otherwise, if it wasn't for my first Comic Con selling my first issue, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now. And because that helped me build my audience. And like you said, digital now, I could reach a lot of people, but in the same sense, I don't do like shows, and I don't do podcasts on my own. I jump on like yours or someone else's, and because I have the time to do that. But to make my own show, to do like like that kind of stuff, I don't have that extra time. But whoever does that, if they can find a way to do that. And I've seen some artists and some creators, I've seen them do their own like live selling shows, which it works for them, which is great. Me, like personally, I think I like to be I like to be out there and meeting people too. So
Do,
it's
do you think that because of COVID, and I get the entire thing with cons, but like I like doing panels in person. I enjoy that. I think it is important for people to see who I am.
Mhm.
And I also am going to be having a different approach now, where I'm going to explicitly say, "Hey guys, I'm doing this as a fan panelist. I greatly appreciate if you check out my comic book investing show when I'm doing my comic thing, because there's a lot more information there,
Mhm.
and it's just going to spin the wheels. And here's all my information, and sort of just give it to them because I'm answering questions."
Yeah.
And I'm also becoming a lot more selective where I'm going to present. I'm also doing a little bit more research demographics, where I'm in Connecticut, so I'm in the tri-state area. There's a lot of conventions between New York, Connecticut, Jersey, and when I'm going to cons now, I'm actually going to be doing a lot more demographic research, because I'm going to be a lot more selective.
Mhm.
Obviously, this show takes up a lot of time, and it's a very influential show on who I can reach. I'm making tweaks. I'm expecting to have a much larger audience for the wrestler I'm interviewing tomorrow night. And then because of who she is, and because I'm marketing it now.
Right. Right.
And then obviously I'm becoming more of a marketer, which I think is going to make a bigger difference. But I'm also going to say, okay, what is the demographics? What is the medium income here? What are these people at this con expecting? Because I'm obviously trying to get clients for something else through a panel. And I think that's what I'm doing. I'm becoming a lot more selective because of COVID.
Right. And that's more economical. Like, and even like, for me, like going to different cons, like I'll try a con out and I'll collect the data from that. Because I use Square, so I track everything that I've done there as far as sales and then collecting emails, so I can see how much audience gathering that I've gotten, how many sales, what in the cost versus like actually attending at the table, the food, the gas, the travel, staying at the Airbnb or a hotel. You take that information and you see what's cost effective and what's not, and if it's not a cost effective con, then you may be less likely to do that one again. But if you have,
Do you also feel that there are cons that are better for indie, for instance? So I know that certain people live in certain areas, and there's a big indie comic movement around in those areas, and
yeah,
people do well versus, and also the idea where people are saying, "Hey, I'll go to a smaller show." So, like, I went to a Comic Con up in Poughkeepsie. It was a lot more indie friendly than going to a con like Awesome Con when I used to live in DC, which was cool for commissions and celebrities and big comic artists and
yeah,
all that stuff, but probably wasn't a fun indie
yeah.
element. And
I
so,
think too. It does. There is there's certain areas that are harder sells for indie creators because they're there for the celebrities. They're there for they're not there for comics, even if they call it a comic con.
because I know that there's a big discussion now of big cons versus small cons, and I know people that maybe there's 2,000 people at a con and they're doing great as an indie creator because they're not competing with celebrities. Maybe there's a top older veteran comic guy who's there because he's getting a decent amount of money, but he's not getting an exorbitant amount of money.
Mhm.
He's signing for free, and it's a non-competitive environment.
Right.
But when you go to a major con, obviously the biggest one around me is New York Comic Con,
Mhm.
and there you go, and that's probably a massively competitive environment.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you're an indie comic creator, you got to be on your A game because you're dealing with 100,000 people. You're dealing with a lot of big sharks in the water, and
Mhm.
everybody wants a piece of the action, and it's a very aggressive environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, what is that like for you in your thought process, where you're sort of adjusting, or are you just saying, hey, I'm going to still go to some of these big ones because I know you're going to Boston Fan Expo.
Boston is the biggest that I've done so far. I think Baltimore and Boston are the two biggest that I've done. I was very successful at both of them, so I'm doing them again this year. I was supposed to do them last year, but that didn't happen.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
understandable.
but those were big cons, and they were very successful for me. Also, I do a lot of local. I'm north of Pittsburgh. This is where I live, so I do a lot of in the Pittsburgh area. Cleveland was very good for me. Wizard World Cleveland. Um, I'm doing Erie this September, so there's a lot in this area that I like to hit up. But I've also done Detroit Motor City Con. That was a good one as well. So like I do anywhere from like small to medium size large. I haven't done like I haven't done the New York Comic Con yet. It's for me. I think I'm not ready for that yet. For me, I think I need to. That's not cost effective for me at this point in time. Whereas like Boston, yeah, that was probably my most expensive, but I also broke even because I made so many sales with just 2 issues. So now going back there with 5 issues and a trade, it's going to be even better.
Yeah, for me, I like to stay within a 25 to 35-mile radius of wherever I'm centrally located. And because it's not cost effective if I have to stay in a hotel. Like when I was in Washington,
Mhm.
I used to go to Otakon and Awesome Con, and then George Mason had a small con that had people like Rob Liefeld came to that and things like that. And then I've done Blurred Con and a variety of other things in that area because it's just massively cost effective and I do not have to pay for a hotel. It is very hard, especially when you're a panelist and you're not getting paid.
Right.
You know, And while it's fun to stay in a hotel, there are advantages. It is also, money goes a long way. And I'm not selling a product at the moment. I'm working on a product. It's going to be a fun product. Obviously, it's dealing with comic book investing, and it's not a secret. But until that product comes out and I'm selling, I'm keeping my costs extremely low. So obviously, it's. I think it's going to be very interesting what happens and how people adapt, because I think people are dying to come back to cons, but I think that there are changes coming on how people approach it, what people do, who's there. I mean, I know that a variety of companies have made changes in their business model.
Yeah, and I've seen some of them get more expensive and having less people come in, which those ones I've kind of stayed away from. I mean, if you're going to change your cost model and charge more, for letting less people in, it's definitely not cost effective. I'm not.
I could tell you that so Awesome Con has something called Pride Alley. Now, I used to present in Pride Alley. A white heterosexual male presenting in Pride Alley. That's an oxymoron for you. But what's going on with them right now, and I just got an email, is that they just extended their deadline for Pride Alley. And I don't know if they extended their deadline for other panels, but they're having a hard time finding fan panelists at the moment. And I think that, obviously with Pride Alley, they're having a very hard time because it's a niche down. But I think it goes to show that people, at least in DC, and whether that's because DC is a crazy fucking place right now. And everything that's happened in the last 2 years. Also, the city becoming way more expensive, and a variety of other things. Obviously, that could be a factor, or people moved out, or people don't want to go to a con so quickly and present. And maybe people want to go as fans, but they're saying, I don't want to present anymore. And I would happily present at Awesome Con if I lived there, but I don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
And obviously, I submitted to Hartford and a con in Hartford, Connecticut, because I live in Connecticut now.
Right.
So, but even still, I'm not so gun-ho. In September, and we're going to see if I get accepted. And I have a feeling there's not that many people doing panels and wanting to present. And I just get that feeling. And so it's going to be very, very interesting in that front. So I don't know. That's why I'm letting the dust settle, and I'm just sitting tight. So obviously, that's how I feel. So how do you feel about Kevin Nash? If it's appropriate to talk about it.
No, it's very appropriate. Matter of fact, so this was back when my oldest son, who he's going to be turning 13, he was in diapers. And this is before I started going to cons and selling. This is when I was going to cons with my cousin, and we were enjoying ourselves. And so this I think he was one. Around between 1 and 2, he was still, like I said, still in diapers, and he was dressed up in his Batman costume, and I had him in a stroller, and Kevin Nash was there. He was signing and taking pictures and stuff, and so I went to take my son to the bathroom and to change his diaper, and so I'm in the middle of I'm on the koala change station in the bathroom, and with my son, and in walked Kevin Nash, and my back's turned. Because I'm facing the wall, and the urinals are behind me, right? And I hear this gruff voice going, "Oh, I remember those days," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, I know that voice." I turned around and I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "How old?" And we had a full blown conversation about my son, about his kids, just that kind of while he's taking a leak. And then, literally, as I'm finished, then he walks out. I'm finishing up getting, putting his pants and costume back on. And then Ernie Hudson walks in, and I almost have the same conversation with him.
And so on that note, I'm going to give you an opportunity to self-promote, because that's how we transition. We go from talking about how cons are going to Kevin Nash all the way to self-promotion time. So obviously, this is perfect segue here. So where can people find you on Kickstarter? back the project, find you on social media, you know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know what other social medias are out there. TikTok, it's the new thing, everybody. I love TikTok. I had to get back into TikTok. TikTok is where all the cool kids are on.
And
So,
I've been trying to think about how to make that work for my situation, but I'm just not there yet.
Twitch and TikTok are extremely hard
Yeah.
for comic
Yeah.
people. It is difficult.
Yeah.
I do comic book facts on TikTok. 60 seconds, easy facts. It's that's what I do. And anybody can copy me, be my guest. But Twitch is hard. Twitch is hard.
Yeah, I think if you're an artist, you can make Twitch work for you. Like, you know, Connor Hughes is a big Twitch artist. You know, the artist of White Ash. He uses that often. But anyway, so for me, you can find me on Kickstarter. You can go to lonewolfcomics.com/nightwolf. That'll take you directly to my current Kickstarter page. And I'm also on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Lone Wolf Comics. And I'm also, you go to visit my website, lonewolfcomics.com. I also have an online shop there. And yeah, I mean, come find me, and I'll tell you, hey, if you comment, I'll comment back.
And on that note, Adam, saying it, you have to support indie. It is super important to support indie. And what that means is that obviously, first and foremost, you need to support economically. So you have to back Kickstarters. If people have online shops, you need to buy their merch, their other projects. You know, if you missed the Kickstarter in 3 months from now, you only got, you know, issue 1 and 2, or you only got, you know, X, or you got the digital and you want a physical copy and it's up on the store, that's a way to do it. Obviously, email lists, super, super important.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a big difference when you back on an email list.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a big deal. So that is super important, as well as, if I don't already say it, you know, following on Twitter, following on Instagram, Facebook pages.
Yeah, like, share, comment. I mean, even if you can't afford it right now, that's not a problem. Like, share, comment. That's that's what
I was about to say. You know, I've been saying it too. I don't know if you've been watching my shows here, but I always say, hey, look, you know, right now COVID has wrecked a lot of people. Okay, and this is part of the entire con discussion, is that the economics for a bunch of people is there, and for a bunch of people it is not.
Exactly.
And believe me, I mean, I've been tightening up my financials. I've been tightening up my financials since January and all of 2020. And I've been making it a lot tighter because it is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Where while things are coming back, you know, there's a lot of jobs that are not coming back.
Yep.
There's a lot of professions that are going to be a lot tighter.
Yeah, a lot of retail, a lot of restaurants have been closing.
And so, and a lot of businesses aren't coming back. And so that is something to keep in mind, that if you are in a situation where it is tough, don't go into debt to back a project. That applies for everybody's Kickstarter, applies for your Kickstarter, applies for a lot of other things. Obviously, I have a support button in the link here somewhere. Don't go and support me if you can't support yourself first and foremost. While I do appreciate when people throw me money for this show, because it is expensive to run it, I totally understand that people really, and I'm encouraging, make sure you're good first and foremost. And that means make sure your rent's paid, your mortgage is paid, make sure you got water, electricity, food, shelter, you know, make sure your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, they're good. You know, your partner's good. Make sure if you have kids, they're safe. You know, if you have a pet, make sure your pet's okay. Also make sure that, you know, your mortgage is going to be paid next month. Your rent's going to be paid next month too. And because those things are important. And if you have debt right now and you can service your debt, do it right now, because a lot of debt is at a lower interest rate right now, and it will help you. And if you're not paying your rent or your mortgage, at some point that's going to come collapsing onto you. So please go do that. And this isn't me trying to scare anybody or advise anybody or anything, but it will come and bite you in the ass. So please take care of yourself financially before you go back anybody's project. And that's why you should be supporting people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, like, share, comment. a heart on Facebook goes a long way, and sharing it on Facebook goes a
Retweet on
long way.
Twitter. Yeah, I mean, sharing a story, you know.
It goes a long way, and especially if you have 1,000 friends and on Facebook, and you share it right to your wall, you don't know who is going to be seeing that,
Mhm.
and you don't know that, hey, your best friend might say, this looks awesome, let me check it out, and then they back it because you shared it, or you retweeted it, or you liked it on Instagram, or you commented on Instagram, or you just told somebody. You said, hey, I
Maybe
saw
your
this.
friend will let you read it.
So you send somebody a message, it goes a long way, and it is crucial because it does make a difference. So on that note, after my self-promotion of promoting you, I'm going to give you the final word.
So yeah, like I said, we're on Kickstarter for another 15 days. You can go to lonewolfcomics.com/nightwolf. Again, if you don't have the funds, don't worry. Just like, share, comment. We appreciate all your help, and us as creators, we're here for you. As we want to share our story with you. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. So thank you, and appreciate everything and all the support you guys give us.
I don't think I could have said it any better myself. So that is a wrap.